All yours.
Oh, thanks, Nancy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our third installment of our immersive audio masterclass series here. If you had joined us a few months ago, great. If you've been along the process the whole time, we're happy to have you back. If you have missed the first few, you can check them out. As a member of the Podcast Academy, you can go into the member section and watch the replays of those. The first one was a basic introduction called Integrating Immersive Audio, the Basics for Podcasters. That happened a couple months ago. Our last one that happened a few weeks ago was Crafting Stories and Conversations in Immersive Audio. And today, I'm excited because we're going to be talking about partnering with a professional sound mixer, the timing and benefits. We've got three amazing panelists who are joining us. We have Steve Lack. Steve, raise your hand. There he is. So Steve is a Steve Like Audio, and he's a leading audio production company. He's the owner of that company, and he's also an advocate for sound mix and design in our industry. We also have Nico Hewitt. Nico, raise your hand. Nico is with Mirror Studios, and he's an accomplished sound designer and mixer and works on many of their projects. And then we have Joe Godley. Joe, raise your hand. And Joe's an independent podcaster, and he has employed people like Nico and Steve. So we've got a great opportunity for you guys to hear the perspective from three different points of view in the industry today. With that, we're going to jump right into it. I have a list of questions. This is going to be a Q&A panel today, unlike the previous ones, which we went through a slideshow. Today, we're going to be doing a Q&A. But I want to lead off. Steve, tell us, as an advocate of immersive audio workflows, what are some of the key signs that indicate a podcaster is ready to collaborate with a professional sound mixer?
Well, most of the people I work with kind of start out with the DIY approach. And then as their show evolves and they are looking to do more to do more creative stuff, they start to look into some of the tech requirements that make the show stand out, how you'll stand out in the feed from other podcasts in your feed. And the first thing that confuses people are the LKFS, LUF spec, and what is loudness versus volume. So if you're doing dramatic audio or even nonfiction work that would benefit from a wider, more comprehensive sound field like immersive, that becomes a job unto itself. So I would say that if you're trying to figure out how to make your podcast sound like the other podcasts that you're competing with, like from a loudness level standpoint, or getting a clean dynamic sound quality, or if it starts to feel like it's taking you out of the content creation and creativity and production of your podcast, that's probably the time you want to work with a mixer or a sound designer, so you can concentrate more on what you do best and let us concentrate on what we've spent our lifetime working on.
Thanks. So Nico, hand it over to you. Based on your experience in working with various podcast producers, what common audio challenges do podcasters face that a professional sound designer and mixer can help overcome?
Yeah, in my experience, one of the things that we really wanted to capture was this idea of people listen to podcasts in so many different environments now. People are in their cars listening to things, they're at work on their earbuds or whatever. And one of the things that we really wanted to try and do was creating a neutral level where it sounds just as good everywhere that you're listening to it. And I think that there is certainly a level of that quality control that comes from a professional mixers and the different environments where they can set things to be and make sure that, the content creation that the podcaster is wanting to create has the ability to have, the core of their vision and what they're wanting to give to their audiences can be upheld to the best of ability that it can across all mediums. Great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Joe, with your audio drama Walls in Prime, which was nominated for an Ambie again, so congratulations on that. At what point did you decide to work with a professional sound mixer, and how did that impact your production?
Well, I don't think we were nominated again. We were just nominated back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, yeah.
But it was a non-negotiable for me. As soon as I had the idea, I called my buddy Will Manning, who does the sound design and mixing for Walls on Prime, to pitch him the idea because I know what I do well and I know how much work this all takes. And specifically for audio fiction, audio drama, or as I like to call them, ear movies, if I want to create something that sounds incredible and I know that I don't have the skill set to create the thing that I want to listen to, I have to employ that person. So for me, it was never a question.
Great. And maybe kicking it to all three of you, what are the main benefits that a professional sound mixer brings to the podcast compared to handling the audio mixing on your own? Steve, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I kind of mentioned this before. It gives
Yeah.
you the ability to concentrate on what you're good at. We've all, we spent our careers working on getting a great sound and digging into things like LUFS and levels and EQ and compression and noise reduction and what are the coolest plugins out there. And that's our jam. That's what we do. But if you're a great storyteller or a journalist or an interviewer, creative producer, you're not going to be wanting to spend your time figuring out what do they mean by -16 LKFS, So really, I mean, I think that that's where you step out from wearing all those hats and doing everything on your own to, hey, I'm going to do what I dreamed of doing when I started this podcast and let these guys do what they think about.
I think also going off what you're saying there, Steve, is there's that, you said it before, is that element of like, as you want to get more involved and do more with your podcast and everything, you have this technology element that starts to rear its ugly head towards you, where like you're like, I need the proper equipment to make it sound right, and I do I have the, where am I going to get all these sounds that I'm thinking about and everything. And I think that there's a lot of merit to having a professional sound designer do it. We have the tools already, just because that's what we do all the time, and use the tools that are the best for that job. And we always have massive sound libraries we've collected over many years to pull from. And it makes it more and more of the podcaster, the world can be their oyster. It's just like we can dig, like they can give us the vision and we can dig into what we know on that whole breadth of audio to get exactly what you're hoping for.
Yes. So maybe Joe, from a creator's perspective, because we've got two brilliant designers and mixers, but from a creator's perspective, how did partnering with your sound mixer and designer help you achieve the vision for Walls and Prime? What was the process in that?
Yeah. So at first, Will and I never done something like this before. So I'll say that after we got through all the figuring it out, what we have now is a process that really allows Will to sort of be like, to be very candid and be like, hey man, I know you love these 10 minutes where you're being really witty and artsy, but you got to cut it. Like, it doesn't help the story. It's just fat. You got to trim it. And I'm like, yeah, you're the sound guy. You're right. So I say this essentially saying the phrase kill your darlings. I used to shy away from it. I used to hold a lot of things precious, but I've had enough time now with Will Manning just essentially laying flat, like, you can keep it, but I would cut this, and just trusting my sound guy to know best. And it created something better than I could have ever imagined. And I don't think we would have been nominated for an Ambie had I not given him that creative license to be like, dude, trust me on this.
Wow, that's really great perspective. So Nico and Steve, as sound mixers and designers, um, when a client or a creative partner reaches out to you to discuss a potential project, how do you like to get involved? At what level? What step? And what is the process to best prepare that opportunity for a professional sound mixer designer like yourself?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go first, Steve.
I like to be I mean, it depends on the type of show, obviously, but I like to be there early pre-production because I mean, it's an audio first medium. And so the sound design, sound environment, how you're collecting and creating your sounds is really part of the storytelling process. If you come to me with just a finished script and say, here's what we're going to do, we'll let you know when it's recorded. I'm not going to be able to do as intense of a job on that as if I'm actually in the sessions, helping run the sessions, helping doing the recording, all that stuff. So I like to be involved just from day one, even on interview shows. I do a show called Dating While Gray, and it's a sort of interview docu style podcast, weekly podcast. And I sit in on all the interviews just to listen for what I'm going to get, and also to help the guests feel more comfortable. Can you get a little closer to your mic, or any chance you could find some headphones, that kind of thing. So yeah, I like to get involved really early on.
Yeah, similar. I too also. It's really great. I mean, I originally come from a theatrical background, and theater production, and it's that same element of everybody is giving the pieces to the puzzle that are going to make the finished product happen, and so that open communication from as early as possible uh, really helps to develop you know build that world that you're thinking of, and there's the element of we know what we can achieve, and we also are excited about the challenges of what kind of breaks the borders of what we can achieve too, and that can happen a lot in those early discussions about what is your world that you're going for, and how big is it going to be, how complex is it going to be, and one of the first ones that I worked on had a massive, sci-fi futuristic world, which was just a huge breadth of what it could be, and we had to whittle it down into something that we could achieve in a time frame that worked, but also we all got to experience a really fun way to all collaborate about ideas for it. We all talked about inspirations for what this world, what we're thinking this world is like, or elements of this world that inspired us to want to tell this story and everything. And I think a lot of that comes out in those early discussions, as opposed to coming in late with like here's all this audio, it's pretty good, and this, that, and the other thing, and you're like, well, proper recording of the whole thing makes it a lot easier for us to make sure that your story is coming through the right way, and we want to have that discussion in that way as well. So I think really early communication is beneficial to everybody involved for sure.
And also, if I could jump in, you can't discount the serendipity that
Oh,
happens when
I
you
think
get a
that.
bunch of creative together to start talking about what they're trying to achieve. Stuff that, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, we should try this. And that's a huge part of it, especially of a dramatic production.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, obviously, we have two mixers and designers on the Zoom, so that's our listeners and our participants, and viewers can learn about you both. But Joe, when you wanted to bring on a sound mixer and designer and a professional to work alongside you, how did you go about finding that person? Was it a recommendation, or did you hear him do work on another show?
Well, talk about serendipity. I years ago was doing the starving actor life in New York, and the revolving door of subletters coming through my 3-bedroom apartment. One of them was Will, and he came in with his monitors and his guitar and his setup, and I just was like, "Can we please be best friends immediately?" Um, and so I was, pursuing the acting thing, but I was also writing a butt ton, and just bouncing ideas off of him. So it was very clear, like, this is my guy that I'm gonna, I'm always gonna ask if he's available. So I got lucky in that way.
And Steve, Nico, when it comes to introductions to new clients, is it mainly word of mouth, or have you found that people are finding sound mixers and designers for their shows in a unique way?
I find every single client I've ever had for 30 years is has all been through networking. It's all been through things like this and the Podcast Academy and being on the LinkedIn and on Podcast Academy Slack and going to meetups. And so I'm out there just being out there. And so people find me that way. And then of course referrals and word of mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think it's a lot of how a lot of this community works, and how this works is it's all networking and word of mouth and everything. But we've also had clients come in based on work that we've done before. People listened to what we had done before with an immersive audio experience, and they wanted to, dig into that as well. Their project wasn't as complex as our first one, but they loved the idea of it and how it sounded and the world that it created. And because of it, they looked us up and reached out to us to work on a piece for them. So I think it's networking and your own work that came from networking itself. So it all comes down to networking in the beginning, but then I think it can start to expand and populate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So Steve, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that, one of my pet peeves is like, if you're looking at people's reels and you're looking for a sound designer or a mixer, don't try and find somebody who's already done your show. Look at the quality of the work and what they're doing, because your show is unique and different. And so you're not going to find somebody who's done exactly what you're doing. And I often get that. It's like, well, you haven't done a podcast about fly fishing. It's like, yeah, but I've done 500 podcasts, so don't get locked into that. I need to find somebody who knows exactly what I'm doing before I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, following up on that, Steve, maybe let's talk a little technical stuff for a few minutes. Can you explain maybe some of the advanced mixing techniques that professional sound mixers use to enhance podcast audio quality?
Yeah, that's my thing. The thing with non-music media is dialogue is king. You got to be able to hear it, and you have to be able to understand what's being said. And podcasts, I think Nico mentioned, are often being listened to in non-optimal environments, and they're on earbuds or they're driving or they're on the train. So you got to really make sure that what you want them to hear can be heard. So that always starts with EQ and compression. So if you're I mean, if you do nothing else but levels, EQ, and compression, you'll be able to get a great mix, great sound. But in podcasting, especially where you'll have host guest interviews and people are in their office or on a boat or in their living room, you'll get, you have to deal with things like excessive air conditioning, fluorescent lights, a dog barking in the background, lots of room tone. Maybe they're way off their mic or they're using their MacBook mic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that's happened in the last few years that's amazing is a lot of these new tools have come out to help you eliminate some of that background noise. So, I mean, the number one advanced technique, I think, is being able to do noise reduction. A lot of people are using Descript, and it has a built-in studio sound thing. And I would recommend, if you're using that, to use it very sparingly. It's really easy to overuse that and get a kind of a flat sound. So if you are doing that, start with about 25% and see what happens. But really, I recommend exporting your mix from Descript into a DAW so that you can do a proper mix. And then there's some plugins when we talk about advanced techniques for noise that are just amazing. I like DX Revive from Accentize, and Acon Reverberate 3 just totally eliminates the room noise. So if you are doing DIY, you'll want to invest in those kind of tools. But that's where I start. I start with noise reduction, levels, EQ, and compression.
Thanks for sharing that. And Nico, how does sound balancing and handling complex audio environments contribute to creating an immersive listening experience in some of the shows you've worked on? I know you just finished a pretty big audio drama.
Yeah, I think there is the as the tools expand, it makes it so that we can achieve those things that much better. And this immersive Atmos element of audio mixing that's developed in the last couple of years has made it so that when you had when you're locked into like tight mixes, there's been you want all this stuff in there, and the more that you get in there, the more you're trying to balance out that you can still hear the dialogue underneath it. One of the things I've always struggled is I'm a big podcast listener myself, and it was one of the things that we really wanted to fight against was that all this sound and everything that's in there is wonderful, but it starts to step on dialogue and you can't hear the dialogue because there's too many other things on top of it. And this new ability to mix things in a three-dimensional space, be it if it's in a binaural headphone mix or just in like a full speaker mix in like a big room, it's being able to place things and pull all that stuff out of when it was all right here, makes it so that you can really work like you would with a movie or whatnot, to really put that dialogue right in the middle so that it's always there, and then you can work all the way around it in this big sphere around you to make that sound come from all different elements. That was a big boon to us on this sci-fi one that I was saying. It was just like this big huge world. There's futuristic explosions and everything like that all happening. There's a big crash that happens, so you still need to hear all the dialogue that happens, but all this chaos is happening around it too. And being able to mix it in that orb around your head, like we did a lot of binaural work with it because it helps to place it, because not everybody's going to be listening to something in a theatrical spacing or whatever. And I think there's the ability to expand it that way, and tools like Steve is talking about, just it makes it so that you can really make your dialogue be there and everybody's hearing your story that you're trying to tell, but you also have the ability to create this world around it and really place those specific things around it. Like the director on the project that I worked, he and I sat down and went through each of these chapters, and we're just like, all right, like we're walking into this room, and like, where is everything happening in this room? And we could actually place those sounds in those places in the room. And it just created this really amazing world building element. And then there was like a more simplistic one that I worked on recently. And the more simplistic one was just, it was a book that got adapted into an immersive story, and it didn't need as much, but just the idea of creating an immersive sound field of just, we're by the beach, and having all that sound there, and like some kids playing in the background or whatever, or like running along the beach, and like it just creates that, like Steve said it so well at the beginning, it's just like the ear movie element. It's the you can close your eyes and you're just like sitting there on the pier while this romantic scene is happening between this couple, and you get to listen in on their conversation, but you can hear the world that's happening all around at the same time, and it creates this really amazing thing where you're just creating a world inside your own imagination, and we get to be the tool that gets you in that direction. Like the producer has their vision, or the director has their vision, or the writer has their vision, and they really want that feeling to it, absolutely. And just getting to work with us and balance it that way, it just makes it so that we can really capture that world that they're looking for.
Thank you. And so Joe, walk us through a situation with Walls on Prime that you and your mixer had a challenge, and you had to accomplish a storytelling challenge in an audio solution. I know I'm throwing you a curveball, well, outside of our prep, but I wanted to kind of hear what was one of the crowning moments of success where you guys accomplished the immersive storytelling experience that you wanted to convey in your script.
Well, there's smaller challenges and then there's bigger ones. So like a real low hanging fruit was I came out and saying, hey, I want this to be fully underscored the whole time by some kind of music. Not that he had to compose it. We pulled from a database. I think we used Envato Elements for our music. They let you do you pay a subscription fee and you get the rights to use the music, and it works out for everyone. And he was like super against it, and I was like, all right, well, I'll defer to you. You're the sound guy, but I really think since The pilot we wrote is mostly me just talking for like 40 minutes. I'm like, I really think it would help to be more interesting if we had something else going on other than my voice. He's like, well, I think for like some of it music, yeah, but some of it not. I'm like, all right, cool. And 2 weeks later, I hear back from him. He's like, you're totally right. We're going music the whole way through. So just like letting people try things out, because I always try to come up with, be like, hey, this is my idea. It's just an idea. I could be wrong. I think it's right, but try, it's a starting point. So I think that really helps with mitigating challenges, is not holding your ideas precious going into it. And then we have, I wouldn't call this a challenge, but we initially did Walls on Prime as a microfiction, 10-minute episodes, and we had like 10 of them. And Will, eventually, we were getting ready for some stuff, and he's like, man, I'm feeling really inspired. If we just cut like some fat, we can smush this thing into like one really, really, really good pilot. I was like, okay, what would that take? And he tells me about it. And I had these like intros that were like standalone and had nothing to do with the story, that played at the top of each episode, that I thought was art housey and cool. And I still think they were, but he's like, these intros don't do anything for the story. Like, really, like, what do they act, how do they move the story forward? I'm like, you're right, do it. And that's how I like to say I went from season 1 to episode 1 overnight. For my podcast. So if you search us, all we have is a pilot, because my sound designer, my mixer was like, dude, this is way better if we just, if we make it super tight and one thing. And so that was like an ego moment for me, but I was like, yeah, you're right, dude.
Wow. Wow. That is really insightful. And I can relate in having done both serialized and other versions of audio dramas. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Really well said. Going over my questions here, Steve, what steps would you recommend podcasters take to find the right sound mixer for their specific needs? You've actually probably touched this a little bit throughout this whole session here, but kind of recap and conceptualize what you've already shared with us. You're going to want a sound mixer. What are the first steps that a podcaster should take?
Well, I kind of feel like it's sort of like starting a band, right? You got to be able to communicate. The first thing you have to do, you got to click with the person, and you got to feel like, yeah, I can work with this guy or girl or person. And so, if you click creatively and you can communicate, that's 90% of it, really. So, finding people through word of mouth, through networking, through LinkedIn, looking at reels, all that to kind of start the process. But I think really it comes down to jump on a Zoom or meet in person and see if you can actually work closely with this person, because your podcast is going to be huge. It's going to be a big hit, and you're going to be going for years and years.
Love it. Thanks for sharing. Nico, maybe what are some takeaways you want to share with the audience about partnering with a professional sound mixer to enhance their show?
I think I mean, I talked about it a little bit. I think one of the real fun parts of it is the the evil scientist workshop of the whole thing. It's the specifically just like so many memories are tied to just like on that sci-fi one that we did. It's just like it was it's exactly what Steve was saying. Like you want a sound mixer who clicks with you creatively and and really wants to capture what you're going for. And it's like they need to be excited about it too. And just like all like my favorite elements were just brainstorming how are we gonna make these things work the way that they did. Like one of the things that we talked about was just like you've got futuristic weaponry. Is it Star Warsy pew pew pew, or is it or is it more raw or whatnot? And the conversation that developed because of it was like we want futuristic sounds that are keyed into what's the word analog, like like the guns that we know now, right? Like the weapon we know now, and that's the core of it, but it's now been modified to have scientific elements to it. And I think there's so much merit to the idea of you have that conversation with that sound mixer or whatever, or that sound designer, and it's like, yeah, it's not just like, yeah, I just want some futuristic weapons, like it's like what is that, what is the elements of it that make it that style, and having that give and take conversation that pulls from both sides of the creative's ideas behind it, and what the sound designer knows they have access to, or what they can create from what they have access to, the tools that we have to modify or adjust something to sound the way that you want it to sound. And then there's that idea of just how sound works, and the timing behind it. And we've done it so much. We do it in different environments, different elements of it being, film or in podcasts themselves. The timing. If you have, like I love movies and everything. So there's like, when you're creating ear movies or whatever, it's just like, what that would look like. And when a really good sound designer in a movie made it look really good, and you've worked on maybe movies yourself, and you've seen how the timing works in those ways as well. And so having that give and take conversation with a creative to be able to pull that knowledge and put it in your brain, right? Like put it in your imagination when you're putting it only in an audible world. There's no visual element to base it off of. So how do you create that? And it's so much fun to be able to have those conversations with the creatives and make that happen. And we have the skill set to make it happen. And I think, one of my favorite things is just being able to take that idea and find a way to make it sound right, and seeing what the reaction is when you're like you get it all pieced together, and you're like, okay, I think I figured it out, and you put the headphones on the person, and you're like, all right, what do you think? And you play it, and they react to it in the way that you just wanted them to react to it, and you're like, yes, then we got it right. Like, and it's like, okay, we got to do more of that. And I think that give and take, really fun relationship can happen more when you have the professional sound designer who can take that idea and make it happen. And if you're doing it in a DIY sense, I believe that of course you can still replicate it in your way that is good as well. But I feel like there's so much to be gained in, there's always the idea of bringing somebody else in who may be seeing it a little differently, like Joe was saying, like they see something a little bit differently, or they have their expertise a little bit different, or they know how it's going to work, but they're like, I know exactly what you're going for, and trust me, this is still going to make that happen, even though it doesn't sound like the way I want to do it is what you may want to do on it. So like it's a relationship that just has the merit to make it really work.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That's great. And go ahead.
I was say it equates really to the music world, where you get a musical artist who can produce their own stuff, but then when they bring in a producer, it brings a different perspective to that they would have never thought of themselves. And so it's kind of the same type of relationship.
Yeah. Thank you. So wrapping this up, last question is going to you, Joe. Being a writer, director, storyteller that seeks to work with gentlemen like Nico and Steve, how do you see three-dimensional audio, immersive audio, shaping up for the future of podcasting, and why should podcasters consider integrating it now?
I don't know if I'm the best one to handle that because I don't actually do the mixing and mastering of it. All I can say is that what I have been hearing, it just raises the bar, frankly, with whatever we're able to do. I'm glad Nico has started using the phrase ear movies along with myself. Like, that's what these are, and three-dimensional audio really allows it to be that in a way that other mediums just don't. So I think it really just gives us an edge in what we're able to do, especially from a budget perspective. Like, we don't have to rent, a plot of land in the desert to set off explosions. We can just set off explosions in the desert of our minds, and that's pretty rock and roll. Don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I feel.
It does. No, it does. I think these tools and what what Nico and Steve are able to accomplish allow creators like yourself to have their dreams, their visions come to creation. And as having transitioned from film and TV into podcasting, what I love is your mind will build a world far bigger than any VFX budget I could afford. No matter what studio is behind me, your mind will always go way, way bigger. And
And a
the art of
bespoke
sound.
world to you. Like
Yeah,
the world that your mind comes up with is unique to you.
yeah,
And I hear the
yeah,
same thing, but I hear Joe's world of it.
yeah,
So it's like it's
yeah,
personal in that way. Whereas if you see it on a
yeah,
movie, you're seeing the scene that the director and that everyone put together. But with audio, it's yours.
yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, with that, we're going to end this number 3 in our 4-part series. I don't think we have any Q&A questions today, but for those who are join us again in a few weeks. We're going to have a bunch of experts get into the advanced techniques, so a little bit more into the weeds of immersive 3-dimensional spatial audio mix and design. But for everybody else who joined us today, thank you for checking in and being part of the series. Steve, Nico, Joe, thank you so much for helping out today and sharing your story and your perspectives and your experience. I really appreciate you guys being on with us.
Thank you, man. It
Thanks.
was a blast.
Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. Take care.
Hey, bye.